Oh, there it is. Okay, is everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'd like to call the regular council meeting of October the 13th to order. First on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Move approval. Oh, sorry.
All in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Receipt of committee and commission minutes.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. No delegations and no unfinished business. Correspondence. The council received the correspondence from the Comox Valley Economic Recovery Task Force Industry Advisor Business Case Action Plan Submission Summary Report.
Move receipt.
Seconder. All in favor? Carried. Well, this has taken a while to get onto the council agenda, and not the agenda, just the work from the task force. And I'm very pleased with the work that the task force has done to date. And here it compiles many, many different opinions from the subcommittees of what they think is important for the task force to look at. And you'll see they're highlighted in yellow, blue, green. The yellow are for the village to look at. The blue is for the CVRD to consider with CVEDs, and sorry, that's green. Blue is actions for the to consider of the task force, and white currently ongoing via CVEDs. What we did a couple of weeks ago now was the elected officials got together and went through these pages of information. And what we did, we highlighted the things that we thought were very important to carry forward. And there was 6 pillars, and they were shop, local, arts and culture support, agriculture and food security, tech digital support for businesses, childcare, transportation and regional connectivity, streamlining permitting process for businesses. The 2 days before we were to make the decision, I went and surveyed the downtown businesses, and unfortunately I only got to 25 of them, but the vast majority of them wanted shop local. They felt that was very, very important. And I talked to them about the tech, and some of them have done the tech already. Some are not interested in doing tech, but some would love to have tech and getting on the website and updating their websites. So but the vast majority, of course, they wanted the shop local. It was very important. And one question I asked was, did they think local was the Comox Valley or Vancouver Island? And about 80% of them chose Vancouver Island as local, that they thought that we should be reaching out local in that respect. First, of course, is the Comox Valley, but they all wanted to include the whole of Vancouver Island. And that was from the businesses in the downtown core. Mm-hmm. So we as elected officials got together, and it took us 4.5 hours to get through every line item. It's going to take time to go through these item by item. So I would like to recommend that council move this to the next committee of the whole meeting for a further discussion with staff, and that way we can have the time. We have such a busy schedule tonight and a lot of work to do. And I know you've put a lot of work into your thoughts about what this was going to look like. And I don't want to cut anybody off or not have the full information for you to deal with us. So that's only a thought, but I'm open to suggestions from the rest of council. Yes, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, when's the next committee of the whole?
Less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, maybe since the 6 priorities have already been set. Yeah, maybe that's fine.
Okay. Could we have a motion from council supporting this letter and the 6 pillars and the overview of today, up to date. You've all had the opportunity to read it. And if there's more information you want, or if there's something that you think is missing, we're open to that in the discussion at the committee of the whole. I would take it back to the task force to speak about. Yes.
Hi. So I have a couple of concerns about the task force, but the primary one is that I believe somewhere on the CVED's website, there is a list of industry advisors, I think they're called, or something. And both the Cumberland Business Association and the Economic Development Steering Committee from Cumberland are on that list. However, I understand neither one of them have participated in any such outreach outside of you or Kaylin speaking to them. So that is a major concern I have, which is why I specifically asked for them to be put onto that industry list, and so that they could be part of the TAC. They didn't make it onto the TAC, which I understand, but at the very least, some sort of outreach to them would have been appropriate. So that is a concern, as well as all the staff and time that you guys are putting into it as well. I'm not sure the benefit, but I will save those comments for the committee of the whole, but I'm not, yeah.
Actually, it took us a while to get both of them recognized for the committee.
Yeah.
And there is some members that from Cumberland that were not on the committee, but they represented Cumberland in other areas, like the mountain biking. They were represented, and different, and I think the restaurants were represented. And so there was people from Cumberland involved in some of the committees, but not all. I agree with you. And there, if you look at the yellow highlighted items, they certainly will be involved.
Okay. So then we're looking for a motion to support just the six strategies.
Yes.
Is that what you're wanting?
Yes. And we defer the rest until the committee of the whole for discussion.
Okay. Do you want me to list all 6 of them?
No, you don't have to. Oh, well, maybe you should, because there's no motion on the table.
Yeah, they're not. Yeah, it's not actually there.
Yes.
Okay. That council direct staff to write a letter of support for the Economic Recovery Task Force 6 priorities, which are shop local / arts, agriculture, tech and digital support for businesses, childcare, transportation and regional connectivity, and streamlining permitting process for businesses.
A seconder for that? Oh, sorry.
And to refer the list of specific actions to the next committee of the whole.
Thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Next, we have recommend that council receive the correspondence from the Comox Valley Regional Emergency Response COVID-19 Phase 1 after action report. Vicky and Sean, all in favor? Carried. Well, that's quite a report, a very extensive report. I don't think they left anything undone. They came away with some recommendations. I think they heard loud and clear from individual members of council and staff. And it's going to be an ongoing process. I think we have learned a great deal from the first EOC and what is continuing on, and it never hurts to learn. And this report is so thorough, it covers everything. I see a couple of places where my comments were, and I'm sure there you can pick out your comments also. So would anybody like to say anything else? Yes, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I appreciated the opportunity to give input, and I appreciate that. I believe in the wording it says something about including more community organizations. So I know a big conversation at the Food Policy Council was around food security being included in the EOC and how important that was. So I hope that that will move forward in a real way. I'm not sure what exactly that looks like, but just finding some way to include that concern at the table, at the regular updates. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to add.
Councillor Kettler.
Just to say that we were going to have like a practice EOC exercise, the fracture on 5th, but COVID hit first, so that was our practice. And yeah, I think we did learn a lot. There was a lot of jurisdictional gaps because it was a health crisis as opposed to a natural disaster. So it didn't flow the way the emergency response people normally would expect. So there was lots of learning with that. And I think one of the things was that with natural disaster, I think most of us have had the training before. And basically the training is, self-preparation, have your family ready. But then for local government, they just basically say, get out of the way, right? Like, let the emergency response people do whatever they do. But that really wasn't the case with this health emergency. All local officials had to be involved, and we still had to carry out all our regular day-to-day operations of local government. And so on top of dealing with this health emergency and all the changing regulations coming out from the province. So it really was a huge learning experience. And I think this report covers a lot of that, and and taking a lot of those good learnings into the future, which does include reaching out to nonprofits, figuring out a better system with Emergency Management BC. It was very limited as to what they would cover as far as expenses for local governments, and I think that needs to be investigated. So yeah, lots of good learning coming out of it. Thanks.
Councillor Spruill.
Yeah, no, it was, whilst there had been various emergency response practices in our role, it was mostly aimed at natural disasters like earthquakes, and nobody could have seen this coming. I mean, there must have been movies like this before, but it was very unusual. And so it was a kind of different training to be doing now, keeping away from people rather than bringing people to. So anyway, considering that it was totally unknown territory, the group and the people involved did very well. And Councillor Kettler, I believe, had a lot more involvement with the thing that involved probably writing up numerous reports. So I appreciate that. But the communications have been good. We had regular postings, so that was great. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
I don't have much more to add. Yeah, it's nice to see that we made it through the first wave, I guess. Well, they say. I mostly just wanted to thank Councillor Kettler also. She represented us in high esteem, and the Valley. And thanks, Councillor Kettler.
Councillor Brown, you put your hand back up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that at the beginning there was quite a lot of confusion, and I didn't see this laid out specifically, but perhaps it was a long report and many other pages of reading after that. But that the public was unsure, and I think some electeds were also unsure of whose role was whose. So whether it was the EOC or the local government or the province or the health authority or, and so just clarifying that in a public way, not just to us, who it eventually got to, but I think the public was quite confused about where direction was supposed to be coming from as well. So, yeah.
I will admit there was confusion from the other elected leaders also of what our role was. And I think they learned, when I spoke to them about it, that it needed to be coordinated better. And I think it would have been better if we'd all met together and discussed that. And I think that's the recommendation in the report, is because it's outside of, nobody knew what was expected of us or how to do it really. We are at a disadvantage here in one respect, in this that we don't have a communications person on staff. And that's a great, big, huge gap that we have in our community. So lessons learned.
Yeah.
Councillor Kettler, you wanted to say something else?
Yeah, just that there certainly is a suggestion for a better structure for the policy group, they call it, which would be made up of the elected officials. And they really highlighted the fact that Island Health was absent from the EOC for quite a long period. They didn't designate somebody to be part of it. And I guess that's just like a resource issue. But being that it was a health emergency and everything kept defaulting to Island Health because it was a health emergency, that really complicated things for us as decision makers at the EOC. So that's definitely something that's been highlighted, that we need, if it's a health emergency, we need to have Island Health there at the table helping us make decisions.
Yes, Clayton, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just Your Worship, just real quickly. One of the other pieces that was noted in the report there that staff here have been working on is the business continuity, because this actual emergency, certainly was different than many other ones, where in most cases our operations continued at full capacity other than recreation. And that was a real, a challenge at times, to have staff going to the EOC, dealing with COVID response, working with the various stakeholders in the community. So that is one area that has been noted, and it was great that it was picked up through that process. And that's not only for us as a village, but also the greater region, what that business continuity looks like and how we can maintain these services during these emergencies. So certainly a good piece of information that came out of that.
And I would like to say to each and every one of you, thank you very much for stepping up to the plate, being great with Zoom. It's been a challenge sometimes, dropping council members from meetings, but everybody here, I want to thank you all for all your support and the support of staff also, because it's been a hard road for a lot of people. And of course, Councillor Kettler, you have outshone. Thank you very much for what you have done. I know being a single mom, and in the times like this, it's very difficult with young children also. It's totally different than what I went through. So thank you very much from all of you for your support.
Thanks so much.
Now we can move on to that council received the correspondence from the Cumberland Museum Archives regarding renovation project. Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. I think this is Karen. Hello, Karen.
Morning. Good evening. Whoop. Yeah, so this is report in front of you is for a heritage alteration permit, and the applicant also requesting two development variance permits and a couple other requests, which I'll provide a brief overview for. So firstly, the heritage alteration permit that is requested is a result of the property being located along Dunsmuir Avenue. The applicant has submitted an initial design, which you saw with the referral to the that came forward together with the referral to the Heritage Committee. So you see that on page 64. They have then looking again kind of to provide a bit more treatment to the top banner there, the cornice. So the actual proposal now is a facade design that has a bit more muted colors rather than the white. It's more sort of a gray tone, and then the knees on the cornice. So you would see that in the appendix. So the Heritage Committee recommendation that's supports the application and is recommending for approval of the heritage alteration permit is for the proposed design as attached to the report with the cornice.
Just a moment, just a
Sorry.
minute.
Yeah.
We've
Excuse
got
me,
a
we're-
mix-up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your worship,
I'm really lost.
item
Yes.
5.3 hasn't been covered off yet. So 5.3 is the Cumberland Museum and Archives letter.
Mm.
So sorry,
Okay,
that
sorry,
should be
yeah.
no, that's okay, Karen. Thanks. It's unless council wishes to do this in a different order, they're just
Oh, I've lost it now.
5.3 is right after the report from the emergency recovery
Oh,
report there.
yes. Page 62.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So what is your pleasure?
Well, don't have a problem with that. Just let me just see.
It's,
Oh, here we are.
It
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of information, but it's just asking for
letter of
the
support,
grant application. Yeah.
yes.
Well,
They
I'll
have
move
a
that.
time frame, they have a time frame that they have to submit their application from, and they needed a letter of support that we would support the funding application. So this is what this is about.
Hmm.
Well, I'll make the motion then, unless there's more discussion.
Yes,
So the second piece is asking for approval of the planned renovation projects, which were not included in the package,
no,
which
it's
we may
not.
have seen in the past.
Your worship, just for background on that, this is the same in relation to what was presented to council back in August. The executive director presented the plans or the development project. And so this is, but at that point in time, it was just received as a delegation and information. And so this is just to formalize that project. So just for council, just to remind it, this is only for interior improvements. It's not relating to any exterior improvements. So it's just based on the interior of the facility that is receiving the upgrades and the work on the renovation there. So.
Yeah, it doesn't change the footprint at all. It's all inside work.
And question.
Yes, Councillor Sproul?
Yes, so we actually formally approved the planned renovation. I remember some of the details of it, but did we already approve back in August?
No, we did not.
Is that what we have to do today? That's part of it.
The
Mhm.
request would be for council to confirm that their support for the project as presented back in August there, which included, just like I say, the interior, some mechanical, electrical system upgrades. Staff has been working with them since that time in relation to building permits. So there is all those aspects are underway. However, formal approval for them to proceed is what it's being suggested and recommended by staff, and so that's why they've written this letter here, is seeking that final approval from council.
Wouldn't
Yes.
it be prudent to put those plans in here?
They should have been included. They should
Yeah,
have
I
been
don't
included.
remember.
Yeah. The problem is they have a deadline of the 19th, I think, of this
Oh.
month for the application that they're submitting. Is that the date? Clayton?
I believe so, yeah. This, like I said, this came from the museum, so certainly if council wish, we can, for the first part there, we certainly can request that information. Based on, the only problem is based on the timelines. We only
Yeah.
received this, you could see it last week there, so I'm not sure how we can get those details to council in time there. Yeah.
Well, that's how, make a motion to see how it works. I'll move that council
Brown?
approve.
Oh, sorry. Go.
All right, I just have a quick question first, Sean, sorry. I wonder if anyone remembers, hopefully Clayton, you can remember, whether or not the renovation, I know one of the biggest problems and one of the foremost impetus for the renovation was to stop the flooding in the basement of the museum. Is that piece of it able to move forward with the scale down?
Actually, on that particular subject, that piece is actually being covered by the roadworks that the operations department is handling. That was just awarded a month ago. That will be starting later this month. So that alleyway is actually receiving upgraded drainage there. So that will be resolved through our own work, the village's work, and that's the intent anyway, to resolve it during that process there. So. But there is work that they are redoing the basement in the sense of some of the displays. This mostly is a display updates and upgrades. There's some mechanical upgrades and electrical, but it is really to modernize the display areas. And so they've really scaled it back to not being a renovation that includes added on facilities. It's really just the interior to make it more conducive to upgrading or allowing for their displays to be altered and updated on a regular basis, and have more meeting spaces as well, so they can have events maybe one day. Obviously right now that's not a plan, but have some events that are a little bit larger space, so opening up the main floor there to be a little bit wider. So it's more on the display side of things and accessibility within the building there.
I also think there was fire suppression and artifacts. The right temperature in the building, and to protect the artifacts, if memory serves me correct. Okay.
I'll move the council approve the planned renovation projects for the Cumberland Museum and Archives as presented on August 10th, 2020. And move that council authorize a letter of support be provided to the Cumberland and District Historical Society, signed by the mayor on behalf of council, which supports the grant application for the planned renovations to the museum and archives building.
Second,
All in favor? Carried. Now, heritage alteration. Okay, the council received the heritage alteration and development variance permit application 2731 Dunsmuir Avenue report dated September 30th, 2020. Now, Karen, you're on. First and second, Vicky Brown, Councillor Brown and Councillor Kettler, all in favor? Carried.
Okay, and Mayor and Council, a replay. About minute 49 of the meeting. So yeah, this application before you is has multiple requests. There's a heritage alteration permit and a couple of development variance requests, as well as a couple other requests related to parking. So I'll start with the heritage alteration permit. The applicant provided an initial set of drawings that was presented together with a referral to the Heritage Committee. They have since updated that design. So so you're aware that on page 64 is the original design that was submitted, and they changed the design to mute the colors a little bit, and also to add a cornice treatment to the top, and they brightened the brick a little bit, which complements bright red colors of the Seeds grocery store on the other side. So the application is for a 2-story building. It looks higher because there's lofts. There's 4 units within the building, a small retail floor space on the ground floor, 4 parking space in the back. I'll talk about parking a little later. And overall, the design, the building massing is respectful of the buildings to either side. I mean, they're actually constructing a less tall building than they could potentially in that site. It's a fairly narrow lot, so there's some limitations as to what can be achieved on that site. So he's making it work. The developer's making it work within the space that he has available. We set the building entrance back a little bit, which adds interest to the streetscape. It's not all just a flat, flat windows and doors when you walk down Dunsmuir. So he has done that. There's an entrance to the front and the back of the units. He's considered the solar heating effect with the south-facing windows to the lane by adding an awning over top of the windows. So that's the Heritage Committee. The Heritage Committee reviewed the application. The applicant was at the meeting to present, and the Heritage Committee is supporting the design that's attached in the appendix, which would be part of the heritage alteration permit that you have attached to your report. So that's recommendation number 1, is to approve the heritage alteration permit.
Point of order. Can we, Madam Mayor, can we deal with each part of it separately, or do you want all of this done at the end, all our questions and concerns?
At the end, please.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, number 1. So and we'll you have the recommendations there. So if there's questions again after, I'm happy to answer those. Of course, it's a little bit, there's quite a bit in here, that's for sure. So then the next one is the variance requests. So there's 2 development variance requests. One is for the building footprint, lot coverage rather. So to vary to allow for a larger lot coverage from 75% to 87.5%. Given the small lot size, staff support that request. He's still below his floor space ratio, which means he could, if he had built up, he could achieve a higher density on the site. So that's why staff felt that it was supportable to help him make the project viable. The second variance that he requested was to vary the number of parking stalls. He's got 4 parking stalls behind the retail space on the property. So he has tried really hard to make them all fit. It's certainly tight. And he's required a 5th space for the commercial tenant, or he can divide them up whichever way he wants, but there's 5 altogether, 4 residential, 1 commercial. And he did appear at the APC as he went to the Advisory Plan Commission as well and presented his case. So it's not so much that he's concerned about paying the parking cash in lieu. It's really that he feels he doesn't have no option on that property accommodating additional space. And he was looking towards the village to provide a dedicated parking space off site along one of the side roads. So at this point, staff did not support that second variance in this report, partially, council has it as one of the priorities to do a parking study, and staff feel that we should have that study and inventory done to understand potential options and look at, because if we grant him a dedicated parking space for those units, we have to be able to consider that for other applicants as well. That may still come forward or that may already be in place. So I think that kind of decision should really be based on a bigger study and inventory of existing spaces and potential spaces that could be achieved by, say, putting in angle parking. So staff did not support that recommendation. The Advisory Planning Commission did not support that recommendation either. So those were 2 of the variances, the lot coverage and the number of parking stalls. And then he had 2 other requests which don't really it's not really related to the zoning bylaw. It's not a variance of the zoning bylaw, but it's nonetheless a request for the village to consider So one was that the idea of a dedicated, I alluded to already, on-street parking space for the commercial tenant, so that they knew where they could have parking, and a dedicated on-street commercial loading zone space, because you can't provide that on the site and to the back of the building either. So again, the challenge that we discussed it at the Advisory Plan Commission, the challenge with that again is if we're providing this for this applicant, you know, are we willing to provide this to other future applicants potentially? And staff feel the parking study should also inform that. The APC did point out that the parking study that council is looking into doing, a traffic study, should consider commercial loading zones as a possibility, whether that makes sense or not. So that was part of one of their recommendations. They reiterated that they also recommend council do a parking and traffic study. So that is still included as a recommendation by staff also, but actually was pointed out to me earlier is actually redundant. So you do not need to consider that because it's already part of your priorities, council strategic priorities. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So if you do have any questions, the applicant has held a public meeting on site. There was one person who came by and the concerns are summarized here. It was more general, so not so much specifically to this particular project. Other than that, we have not received any comments from the public on this.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan? Yeah,
Thank you.
I got you.
Okay. Just a couple of comments here. Since the last time we heard this report, I guess the proponents' comments haven't been changed. So it just reminded me how disappointed I am with the language of this proponent. I mean, there's no implication of a guarantee about our parking in lieu, giving anyone an extra spot. So I don't like the inference there that we owe a developer anything. The rules of development are very clear. I think our council has been very clear with the parking issues. We know that we have an issue. And it's not council's responsibility to make the development viable for someone. So I think, I'm just a little disappointed in the language. I agree that the new design is nicer. I also agree with the APC comments and we'll support them. Thanks.
Councillor Sproul?
Yeah, I of course was at the Heritage Committee meeting when we looked at this. And initially I liked the added feature of the brick tower, I guess you'd call it, on the side. Now, I believe it's a different color. I think the planner said that because it doesn't, on this picture on page 64, it doesn't match at all. The colors are dark, are sort of gray and orangey. And then there's this pink brick wall. I'm wondering if it's maybe too late to give this feedback now, but I would just have preferred to see that building be the same all the way through, like have the top cornice go through and not just skip the brick part. I think it'd be easier and build it so that it's symmetrical, the building, rather than asymmetrical. So anyway, I would think it's easier for the developer to just build the left side the same as the right side, but maybe it's just too late for that with their designs. I'm just not keen. We have no instances of brick going up 2 stories in Cumberland. We've got little bits of brick wall at the library and at the liquor store. That's all I can think of, but nothing like a tall thing like this. So anyway, it's I'm just not sure how it fits the historic what's the word, appeal of the downtown. Anyway.
Okay, Councillor Brown?
I appreciate the change they made to the top. The cornice, I guess it's called. I think that makes a difference and helps it fit in. I appreciate the brick, but I see it as Union Bay brick, and so that's the connection for me. I also understand the plight of this developer, and I appreciate what he's trying to do in our downtown core to create housing and commercial space. However, I disagree that he does not have an option. There's always an option. It's just not affordable. And so at some point, someone's going to have to go underground, and that's where you get your parking. If you don't want to do that, then you'll have to pay the parking in lieu so that we can find solutions to parking elsewhere in the village. I also understand the fairly desperate need for commercial loading zones in the village. I know that the brewery puts pylons out when they need to preserve a space on the road, and that Seeds has a truck stop in the middle of the road to unload. I think people go around it and it doesn't cause too much trouble, but we definitely have a need. So happy to support adding commercial loading zones to the downtown core that are limited time loading. That's all.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the APC looking at this and receiving the delegation. I think that he gave his request and his opinion, and I think they thought about it, and our staff thought about it, and they've given us some good recommendations, and I agree with what's been put forward.
I too also agree with what's been put forward. I made my comments at the last time we saw this, and I did not support it then, and I certainly don't support the zoning. I have witnessed what the brewery does and what Seeds does, and it seems to work very well with very little confusion. And I think it's appropriate for that to happen there too. And it depends on the retail that goes in there as to what he's going to require. So someone like to make the motion?
Yeah, I'll move. Where are we? That council approve the heritage alteration permit substantially in compliance with the permit 2020-01 HAP attached to the staff report dated September 30th, 2020. And that council approve varying the lot coverage of the proposed development at 2731 Dunsmuir Avenue from the maximum of 75% as specified in the zoning bylaw number 1027, 2016 to 87.5%, substantially in compliance with the variance permit 2020-06 DV attached to the staff report dated September 30th, 2020. And that council deny the request to vary the number of on-site parking spaces or cash in lieu required in zoning bylaw number 1027, 2016 from 5 to 4. And that council deny the request for a dedicated on-street parking space for the commercial tenant and a dedicated on-street commercial loading zone for the proposed development of 2731 Dunsmuir Avenue. And you said you don't need the final one, Karen, because we're already doing it?
That's
Okay.
my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
That's correct. All in favor, seconder, please. Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried. Next, that council received the development permit 2767 Derwent Avenue report dated September 24th, 2020.
Move to seat.
Seconder? All in favor? Carried.
Mayor and council, this is a little bit more straightforward. It's just a straight up infill development permit, no variance associated with this one. So the applicant of 2767 Derwent Avenue wishes to construct an accessory dwelling unit in their backyard. The site plan is attached to the report following the permit. You can see that if you on the arborist letter, if you want to scroll to page 103, you can kind of see what the layout is. So the applicant is providing, as required by the development permit, a private amenity area in the back. There's some plantings on the next side page is what he's planting. He's planting a hedge to have some privacy. He's also adding an EV charger. He has a required number of parking spaces, so he would require 3, 2 for the main residence, 1 for the accessory dwelling unit. So he can is required to put in 1 off Derwent for the accessory dwelling unit, since we don't clear the lanes in the winter. There's no snow plowing. However, the tenant is able to use something, a space, informal parking space in the back, which you can see as proposed there, next to the accessory dwelling unit. The design fits in with the neighborhood and is generally the windows, or the main entrance is away from the neighbors. We had one comment from one of the neighbors and more inquiring. I included the comment here. It was a number of questions, which I responded to, and then I didn't hear back again. But the comment was generally they were not opposed to it, but just wanted to know, get more information, which I provided. So the neighbor was interested in having a infill ADU herself, possibly in the future. So yeah, generally there's no unreasonable or no unusual asks, I guess, here. Yeah, the owner will be required to have the 1.5 meter width for emergency access from Derwent. The amenity area shall be screened, so that's all in the development permit. The IDU did identify, the Advisory Planning Commission did identify that it wasn't specified whether the surface of the walkway was going to be slip resistant. So that we'll get to that at the building permit stage, and that's identified in the development permit, that requirement of the infill development permit. Yeah, questions?
Councillor Brown?
I have a couple of concerns about, or questions about this development. So I went and had a look, and there is an existing shed where the parking area is planned for this development. I really appreciate the alleys and the character of the alleys in Cumberland. And I think those heritage sheds help contribute to that aesthetic and also heritage style of the existing alleys. And so I wonder how we might encourage people to repurpose those existing sheds versus tearing them down and creating something entirely different, not just for the potential reduction of waste, but also just to preserve the kind of heritage style of our alleys. I know we've done an alley plan, but it doesn't include the private properties on either side and those aesthetic values that the alleys create, and they are special. And so I think we should try to preserve them. Secondly, it's very clear that the intention on this property is for the car to be parked in the back via the alley. Even though there's lots of parking on the front street, the EV charger is in the back with access only from the alley. And the access to the house is also from there, unless the person that's living in the ADU is going to walk through their covered car porch in order to get to their house, which I don't think is the case. So there's that. And then also, it seems to me that there's an awful lot of lot coverage happening here. I'm sure someone has done the math, but there's already 2 sheds and a covered carport and a main house, and now there's an accessory dwelling. So are we really still under 40% lot coverage with all that?
Yes, it looks it often looks like more, all these walkways and little areas on the side do add up to quite a bit. Let me just see. It's really hard to read. I have to. It's actually on the side.
Yeah.
I think we did provide lot coverage, and it was less than the 40. Yeah. He was meeting the lot coverage requirement, so
Okay.
Um,
And I also do appreciate the permeable surfaces he's using. So that part is great.
Mhm.
I did notice when I was driving through that alley and carried on to the next alley up that there are 2 existing ADUs in that alley that are alley access only. And so people are doing this, and then I guess they are making sure the alleys are clear themselves. And my question is this something we want to encourage? Because that's what we're doing by
Mhm.
proceeding with this one. We will have ADUs out of alleys, and that will change our alleys. So that is a concern for me.
Mhm. Yeah, would you like me to respond to that? So he does have to put the a parking spot in the front. So I did mention that, and when staff does the landscape inspection, we confirm that he's put one in the front. We have not prohibited them putting an additional one in the back. Our development permit guidelines don't really give us the ability to say no, you cannot have a parking space in the rear. We could require the EV charger to be associated with one of the parking spaces in the front, the official parking spaces. So that is possible, but yeah, restricting parking in the back, people are allowed to park in the back. So we don't really have a mechanism not to permit that. And our development permit does not speak to, does not really speak to how the visual impact to the alleyway, other than that the building itself should fit into the neighborhood, and I think overall it does. If you see the drawings, it's a fairly it's a fairly standard design. I guess we've seen these before, but generally fairly friendly. Not overbearing. So, we've accepted these kind of designs before. That seems to fit with the intent of the development permit. So yeah, so we have, the development permit gives you the ability to vet the design of what's coming in, but it doesn't give you the ability to deny to make someone not take something down that they want to take down. We don't really have a mechanism for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I think I understand like the need to kind of keep things aesthetically pleasing and sort of historical with the laneway. But I think we would have to think about probably changing the lot coverage amounts if we want people to keep old sheds, but also build new accessory dwelling units. We'd probably have to compromise with increasing the amount of lot coverage they can have, and that would be decreasing green space. So I think there's a trade-off to be had there. And then the other thing is, we're encouraging laneway houses, and that's what we've decided is the best way to have infill. So it's kind of tough for us to say, well, we don't want you in the alleys, but go ahead and build a laneway house. So yeah, I think there's some trade-offs, and probably the aesthetics of the alley is something that one of the trade-offs that we're giving up.
My concern with the CV charger is in the winter months and the snow. They don't expect the village to be plowing the alleyway because that's not something that we're going to be doing. So if they want full year service for the CV charger, they better put it in the front part of the property, because maybe they don't realize how much snow we get.
Mm-hmm.
We can get in the winter. And so I think it would be less of a problem if they did move it to the front of the property.
I think that's the point I'm trying to make, is if we allow people to have parking spots off the alley, then we're saying parking in the with access off the alley is okay. And so what's to prevent them from coming back and saying, I can't get into my driveway because you didn't plow the alley? So whoever moves into this ADU may not know that we don't plow right? It's up to the landlord to make sure that they know that. And I wasn't suggesting that we keep the old sheds. I was suggesting that we
Mhm.
replace so instead of building a brand new ADU on the opposite side of the lot, to actually build the ADU where the shed was previously. So not adding to lot coverage, but just trying to preserve that similar style. Yeah. So I'm not sure what needs to change in order to,
Yeah.
like, do we need to put something in writing with how do we not be responsible for clearing the alleys of snow in the future when people are trying to get into their parking spots?
Yeah. So I think the best way in that case is probably to require that the EV charger be associated with the official parking spot. We can't really tell people not to park off the alley. We don't really have a mechanism for that as part of the development infill DP. I mean, there's access. So when there's access, when there's when there's no snow on the ground, that prohibits accessing. We don't really have a mechanism saying you cannot use the alley to drive to the back of your property. So they could have an unofficial spot. You know, they're showing it. So I mean, that's good. It's
So we could say it's up to them. They could have 2 EV chargers if they wanted, one in the alley and one up front. And then at least the front parking spot is a legitimate parking spot year round.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. The one we require, so we wouldn't require security for 2. We can only require the landscape security that's associated with this DP for 1. So we can require to be the front, and then require this security for that front one. If he wants to add one in the back, that's up to him. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And your other comment. So right now we don't have a mechanism to require siting. We don't have a siting requirement for buildings.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other questions?
No.
Okay, someone like to make the motion?
I'll make the motion that council approve the development permit at 2767 Derwent Avenue, property legally described as Lot 11, Block 17, District Lot 21, Nelson District, Plan VIP 522A, substantially in compliance with the attached development permit.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, carried.
So do we need a motion to say that the EV charger needs to be in the front, that an EV charger needs to be in the front? Or can staff deal with that?
I'm fine to communicate that, as a requirement. The permit itself, the permit itself doesn't state it. The drawing and the permit shows where the EV charger is. So
That's something we would vote on?
I just think it needs to be included in the motion because we're saying we're approving it as it is.
okay,
And
Well, I don't
As amended, with the EV charger moved to the front.
Okay.
Okay, seconded? All in favor? Carried.
thank you.
Okay. Next, that council received the report applications for a temporary use permit, Unit 4, 4640 Cumberland Road, dated September 30th, 2020.
Move receipt.
Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried.
okay, Mayor and Council. So this application came forward this summer. The applicant was wishing to start a yoga, fitness, and dance studio business and came to the village to apply for a business license when we discovered that she did not have the right zoning. So we looked at the mechanism for her to get into compliance, which was to apply for a temporary use permit to permit that use of yoga, fitness, dance studio in the light industrial zone, which is where she's located. which currently does not permit for that kind of use. So staff, she did submit an application, held a public information meeting as well, and staff sent out a letter to the neighbors within a 75-meter radius as required by our bylaws to get comment. So all the comments are attached. I'll talk to them a little bit later. But I just want to quickly go I include the official community plan policy with respect to temporary use permits, just to see to what extent this particular proposal fits our policies as to when we issue temporary use permits. So generally, the application meets a number of these policies, namely, in particular, number 9, inability to conduct the proposed use on land elsewhere in the community. So currently, her use would fit under our definition of recreational facility, which I guess when that definition was written, we assumed that that would be a public facility. So it's permitted in public assembly and institutional zone. So it's not specified as a use, as a private fitness studio is not specified as a use in the zoning bylaw. We do have some yoga studios, small scale. So I think there's a couple home occupations. And then there's also there's one associated with a physio or sometimes they're associated with a kind of health use in the downtown core. So they associate with a professional service or personal service. So what she's seeking to do is not really accommodated by the zoning bylaw currently, or it's a little tricky, I guess. We then looked at just generally to what extent the zoning bylaw currently would support that use along one of the main corridors into Cumberland, and it does support a industrial commercial use along the major corridors and that are also associated with transit. So yes, and then usually if she had applied for a zoning bylaw amendment, which, presumably if this goes well, there may be an opportunity for her to apply for that after the temporary use permit has expired. One of the things I guess she does meet as part of a zoning bylaw when we look at how we assess what the use brings to the community, she would be providing a use that's responding to community need, as so to speak, an amenity, I guess, that the zoning bylaw is looking for. So there's no development permit requirements as part of this temporary use permit. So the requirements associated with this proposed use would be in the TUP, temporary use permit, which is attached to the report. There was a temporary use permit by the owner. She's a tenant, right? And she's the agent of the owner in this application. There was an application 2013 by the owner for a industrial development permit. As part of that, he had to do some landscaping, which has not been completed. And I did show a photo he has to in the report on page 118. No, where is it? 119. I'm just scrolling through this. So the plantings at the back of the property have not happened yet. So I did touch base with him because we discussed it at the Advisory Planning Commission, supporting a temporary use permit when there's still other development permit requirements outstanding. Came up as a discussion item. So I did connect with the owner, and he said he's going to look at doing this fall. So we're talking about how this is to happen. This village still holds a security. So the APC one member did not agree with issuing temporary use permit without that requirement having been met. Other APC members, and this is really also the staff view of the matter, is this particular use. Staff looked at it as independently, I guess, from previous development permits. So our recommendation reflects our belief that this particular use is appropriate at that site, and it's a good test case for a 3-year period for the temporary use, and we'll deal with the development permit, the requirements that have been met independently of this this application. So, but I just want to let you know that discussion definitely did come up. So the meetings with the neighbors, one of the concerns is of course always noise, and this does the hours of a yoga fitness dance studio can go to into the evenings and also occur on Saturdays and Sundays. And the hours can be restricted by the business license application within reason. This type of use does happen in the evenings also. That's when people are off work or on the weekends. So one neighbor did attend the meeting, and the applicant said that she was able to assure her that she would turn the music down if it was ever too loud, or keep the rear door closed, especially I suppose in the winter. So so we trust that that will happen. Or if there's complaints, I guess it may be able to address that through the business license. Yeah, so the applicant did post on her Facebook site about her application. So we did receive quite a number of emails as a result of the application, which are copied into this report people who are supporting a studio, partially or to a large extent users of the dance studio, fitness and yoga studio. So in terms of the TUP requirements, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of things. So there would still be a requirement of an accessible parking stall. It sounds strange, but apparently, I mean, you can have classes for people who are somewhat, I had to scratch my head, to be honest, and I was educated that you can have classes for people who have mobility issues. So it's good to remember. So the applicant was quite okay with providing markings for an accessible stall. We have been requiring electric vehicle plugins as part of development permits. And these could just be longer, just a type 2 or even just an outside plug-in, and an installation of a bicycle rack just to meet the zoning bylaw bicycle parking requirements for visitors. So those would be then required prior to issuing the permit and business license. So there's a few requirements associated with this, the recommended temporary use permit for the applicant. Yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, so the plantings are a requirement of temporary use permit. I just want clarification on that.
So no, so the plantings were part of a development permit that the village issued in 2013 to the owner, who is of course the owner is the applicant, but in this case the tenant is his agent. And she's requiring the temporary use to carry out her business. So no, you're correct. So sorry, the plantings were part of the original development permit, which were not done. So I checked into this when this came the application was received. I did a site visit and noticed that 2013 the requirements have not been met. So the village holds the security for that still from the owner. Yeah.
And
so
what kind of plantings?
So trees. So basically all the way along the via fence line. That photo that I included, there's supposed to be trees that grow quite tall, and that is to the neighbors, and that's quite normal and accepted for an industrial development permit. Usually try to have some kind of buffer or even a commercial development permit next to residential area. So that hasn't happened. Also landscaping at the corner to Cumberland Road. There's some older trees, and he's supposed to be doing landscaping around that, and landscaping up in front along the fence, on the inside of the fence fronting Cumberland Road. So yes, the planting plan has not been completed.
Yeah, well, that's my concern, especially when there's a noise issue. Planting trees obviously would help dampen that. And so how do we help enforce that with this temporary use permit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have the option of making completion of that a condition of the temporary use permit, or that you won't consider the temporary use permit until the other permit requirements have been met, and now is the best time to plant this fall. The village holds the security, so we could do it ourselves through that security. Like I said, I had a conversation with the owner who said he would be starting doing it this fall. And he's actually looking at species that grow a little bit denser as part of his planting plan to provide a bit more noise buffering. But
Okay.
yeah, it's been 7 years, so for sure it's an issue.
It's time.
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Sutherland, did you have your hand up?
No, I didn't, but I'm supportive of this. We don't really have very many places that we can put something like this. So I think this is a worthwhile experiment, but I definitely would like to see the plantings done. 7 years is too long. And especially if we're going to start making allowances for things such as this inside his property that he's going to need to make good on the planting.
Okay. Councillor Sproul?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say on this, but a temporary use permit is probably the best thing we can do, given that she shouldn't really have advertised till all this was in place, but given that her business is going full steam, and if there are plantings, that it's the noise issue, I guess people are worried about. But compared with some of the issues we've had mixing industry and residential over on Royston Road and Union Road, big machines and stuff, I can't see her music being loud enough, to really disturb the residents. And if it's on a temporary basis, we see how it works out, and we'll just have to take that out of the allowable uses if it really doesn't work. So I'm happy to see a way around this through a temporary use permit.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I'm happy to support the TUP. I am concerned that this landowner has several properties in the village and also has several tenants on that property that don't conform to the current zoning. And so I'm guessing that staff is assuming that staff is looking into that now that this has been raised on this specific property. And I think that the use that is occurring on the site is appropriate. It's just not zoned that way yet. So I like the idea of the TUP moving forward to test this zoning, because I think that it's probably a good idea to shift into some kind of industrial commercial mix. And 7 years is too long to not plant the trees. And so now he's going to have to plant bigger, better, bushier trees in order to have the same impact that what he would have had 7 years ago. Yeah, and I'm also concerned that we're adding a more intense use to an industrial zone where there's no, where currently it's septic use. And so we're going from industrial use, which is maybe a few people in an office, to a fairly steady stream of customer flow on that land. And we've got septic, and is that septic built for that kind of use? I don't know. So those are my concerns, but I don't want to, for me, it's separate, and the way it's been presented, it's a separate issue that whether we move forward with this, the temporary use permit. So I just think it's really unfair that she's had to go through this process where the other tenants on the property have not, and that the landlord fully knows what the zoning is on the property he owns. So I'm not sure if there are consequences that we can, but I'm just finding that a bit frustrating.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I was wondering, just a mentioning of the septic on site, if this did come to a rezoning application, if that would have implications for connecting to sewer.
Quite possibly. I mean, when you do rezone, for sure, yeah, the village would look at potentially, yeah, servicing. Depending on the use of the site, generally, yes, yeah. I mean, it would, I can't speak for the manager of operations, but typically it's probably something we would look towards.
Okay. Yes,
So can we talk to the landlord about the capacity of his septic field and ensure that it has the appropriate capacity for the current use?
So I did look at the early applications. He did get approval for washrooms through the at the time to put washrooms in each of the units. So that was, oh, hold on, one washroom was added. This unit already had a washroom. So I assume I'll have to look into this, but I assume that
Okay.
at that time the septic system was considered, that there would be potential for it adding washrooms to one washroom to each unit. So,
Okay.
yeah.
I certainly support the TUP, and I think it's really welcome in the community, as there is no other one like this. I don't want to see them having to move out and losing another business to something that we can't provide. I think it's the way for the future, and I'm really excited about the possibility of this being in temporary use. I do have concerns about the trees not being there. Could you tell me, she operated during this summer, did we get any complaints from the residents about music or noise from any of them down there this summer?
I haven't gotten complaints, no. And staff did also mail out a letter to the neighbors about this temporary use permit. So we did not get any comments from a direct neighbor. So the
Okay.
direct neighbor came to her information meeting to confirm and I guess connect with her, express her concerns, but did not write any into us. We did receive comments previously, and I think I outlined that in my previous report, and it's probably I think it's in here as well, of a Cumberland resident who was concerned that we were permitting the use without her having a business license. So yeah.
Okay, concerning the trees and the non-existent trees, can we fine him for not implementing those regulations?
We're
Consi-
holding the security, which he hasn't been able to get back, and he can't get the security back. It's a substantial sum actually. So
So can we say we want the trees planted in 30 days? Or if not, then the village is going to move forward and do it?
we could do it for him. Yeah, we could do it for him using the security to do it for him. So I have had a discussion with him, and he's checking into trees. He's looking at the species, his approach to nurseries, and I asked him to give me a timeline as to when they're going in, but I haven't heard back. So that was, I only talked to him I talked to him a couple times. So I had an email exchange on Thursday, and I was hoping I would have heard by today before the council meeting of what his timeline is. He's
'Cause I think
he's sourcing the trees, he said.
Yeah, he's had 7 years to put the trees in, so I think that's enough time. So I think we should tell him that if he hasn't got them planted within a certain time frame, that we will do it ourselves. Yes, Councillor Kettler?
Yeah,
Councillor-
also, yeah, that the consideration that those trees would have been 7 years older at this point, much more mature trees. Probably not looking at those. He's probably looking at smaller trees, I would think. So if the village did it, we could take that into consideration and buy more mature trees.
Mhm. Yeah.
Councillor Sullivan?
Do we have the capacity to put in an entire fence line of trees? I mean, that's a massive job.
So the security covers the security charge at the time, I think, and costs increase too, right? So that is of course a challenge, but the security charge at the time is for an entire row of trees up to the end of building that the tenant is in. So it doesn't actually go to quite the end of the property line.
So that would pay for a company to come in separately, basically.
Yeah, so
Yes,
we'd have to
yes.
we'd have to get pricing. We'd have to get pricing to see what current estimates are. So, but yeah,
7 years is a long time for tree prices to go up.
Yeah, potentially. The challenge I would like to add with putting larger trees in is that then the survival rate tends to not be as good because more transplant shock the bigger the trees are. So they don't necessarily, if you plant them just a little, I think probably what was required at the time, because if you plant them too big, the small ones actually catch up because they do better. The establishment is easier. So
Yeah. I wasn't meaning the village crew going out and planting the trees. I was meaning that we hire a contractor to come in and do it.
no, I understand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was the case for sure.
Yes, yes. Okay, so what is your pleasure? What would you like to do?
I'll move that council approve the temporary use permit for Unit 4 at 4640 Cumberland Road, legally described as Lot 1, Section 25, Township 10, Comox District Plan 35738, substantial and in compliance with the permit attached to this report.
Second.
All in favor? And I know you've got your hand up. Okay. Carrie?
Can I add though that we're going to make it conditional upon the tree plantings? I think that was part of the intention of our conversation. Was I wrong?
I'm worried about holding her business up.
Yeah.
I think we have enough to say to the senior planner is if he's not going to do it, then we will do it. There's no option. He's got a time frame to put them in. And if he hasn't, then we'll go out and find somebody to do it for him. And he loses his funding or his money.
Would that be part of the motion?
I don't think you need to be a part of the motion, do you? It's direction.
Karen?
Well, we do have the DP, right? So now that this has brought attention to that outstanding DP, I wasn't actually aware of it because it's from 2013. So then when a new application comes forward, right, you look at the file and I have been in contact with him. So I'm happy to send him a formal letter saying it has to be done within, within this fall planting period.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you.
We still need to vote. We need to vote still.
Oh, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. That council received the development permit application Lafarge, Canada, 4135 Cumberland Road, report dated October 5th, 2020.
Move receipt.
Councillor, seconded by Councillor Kettler. All in favor? Carried.
Hey, I put one easy one in the middle. I think this
Good
one
planning.
is the one. Yeah. So this really is at this point a referral to the Advisory Planning Commission for a industrial development permit to put a portable asphalt plant on the site of the existing Lafarge property. There's only one neighbor, so staff is suggesting to waive the requirement for a neighborhood public meeting, which would be mailed to one neighbor according to our bylaw within 75 meters, and that person's getting a letter to inform them of the application. So, and they're not local. So I think my recommendation is to waive that requirement. And then this would come then back to you with more details and after discussion with the Advisory Planning Commission. I did.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Councillor Sproul?
Yes, I'm curious to know how the implications of bringing an asphalt plant onto this land, which is so very sensitive, just outside the boundary of this, like opposite the gateway entrance to Lafarge is a hatchery that the Kiwanis run. There is also Millard Creek starts there and right on the edge of the aquifer. Piercy Creek, all fish bearing. Roy Creek at one side of it is extremely sensitive land. And I think what would happen if some of the asphalt, I don't know what, I know it's made of toxic substances, but I guess there is a kind of development permit, maybe the planner can tell me, that would protect that very, very sensitive land across the road.
Mhm. Yeah, so he's actually got 2 permit applications, and it's in one single report, but it's for an environmental DP and an industrial DP. So asphalt plant is a permitted use on the site, but he has to show through his stormwater management plan and a safety plan and how he would address dealing with any potential runoff from the site. And the environmental DP outlines any sensitive areas which are on his property, specifically to the north section of the property. So we'll look into that. Thanks for pointing that out.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Someone like to make the motion?
I'll move the council refer the development permit application 2020-08 DP for 4135 Cumberland Road to the Advisory Planning Commission for comment, and further waive the requirement for a neighborhood public meeting for development permit 2020-08 DP.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, recommend that council receive the wall treatment heritage alteration permit 2700 Dunsmuir Avenue report dated October 13th, 2020.
Receipt.
Councillor Kettler, second. All in favor? Carried.
So this is the last one for me this evening. In last November, the council approved a heritage alteration permit for the property next to the liquor store on that empty lot, which is one over from the Waverly Hotel. And at that time, that fairly large blank wall above the single-story liquor store was discussed as needing some kind of treatment of that wall. So that was one condition of the heritage alteration permit. So he's now ready to build, and he still needs to meet that last condition of the heritage alteration permit. So this is coming back to you for specifically for that one item. So the developer and applicant did look into, looked at a local, got a design from locally, local mural painters, and I think he reached out to several, and the one that he is presenting is attached to the report. So I have a number of. It's really an aesthetic issue here, so it's tricky. Everyone's aesthetics are a little bit different, so I tried to kind of look into what might make sense. Or how to look at the drawing, or the design. So initially, you can see on page 134, the architect provide different renderings, which really helped. Unfortunately, the resolution is not the greatest on the second one there. On page 134, you see the blank wall, what it would look like above the liquor store. Because the first story is also fairly high, a portion of the first story would actually be also still above the liquor store roof. And then if you scroll down onto page 135, this was an initial design by the architect. And yeah, I apologize, it's a bit fuzzy. So this was a series of lines and colored lines that would break up the face of the wall, but in a sort of fairly neutral way. And at that time, though, at the same time, the applicant had discussed a potential mural. It did come up in discussions. So that's what we held them to. You were going to present a mural proposal. So he did then also choose a name for the building. So initially, what we then received was a wall treatment 3, which is on page 136, which shows the victories in again the angle is not perhaps the greatest in kind of an old style lettering with the little feet, the fonts. It's my Times New Roman type lettering on the wall. And I did add another picture of that on page 137, where you could just see so it would just show the name of the building. So he has is presenting a mural on on page 138, and then also in the attachment, so you can see it a little bit in a larger scale, of the local painter Joshua David Klassen. So as I said, it's difficult to look at these things. Council has reviewed a few mural designs, I believe, in the village before. So it is quite a large wall on the downtown core. So I guess what staff is looking at is to what extent does it fit in? To what extent does it dominate the streetscape? Is it complementary? So in many ways, personally, I did like that was a bit more monochromatic and not really bright. What maybe it did seem to me not quite fit was the trestle, the reference to the trestle. I appreciate the idea because I've seen it on the Coal Creek site, the idea of heritage disappearing into the forest. So I appreciate the concept of the trestle disappearing into the ferns that are in front. The reference of the trestle did not seem that fitting to Cumberland. I think some of the railway cars, and Gwen, you please jump in when you comment afterwards to correct me, but trestles, some of the railway cars may have been on trestles, but it's not what Cumberland is probably known for. Mm-hmm. So the reference did not seem to did not seem convincing to me personally. And as I said, this is this is definitely somewhat subjective. The airbrush, the style of the image seems to not, it's really difficult, right? The style, the airbrushing didn't seem to be not really, it pushes out the painting. It gives us a lot of the bright white background. So it has a lot of power, I guess, as a result of that. So that may or may not work for you, but it's really a matter of preference. I felt the victory, there was some incongruence between the image and also the type used for the victory. So I think this has some merit, but maybe needs a bit more work. So that's where I'm coming from. Yes, staff is happy to receive direction from council where you wish to go with this. The applicant is keen on getting going with his building permit, and we have received his building permit application. So this is holding up the building permit currently because he has to meet this requirement of the heritage alteration permit.
Okay, Councillor Sullivan, we'll start with you. We'll come back. We'll do the circle.
Thanks, Mayor. Personally, I guess we'll just start with the victory writing. It seems really on the fourth one, on the preferred one, it's really big. And I mean, this surface is going to be seen from all over town. I don't know if I necessarily really like the big victory writing or even just like the naming of the building per se, because that's just you'll see that all through town. But that's just my personal opinion. I prefer actually the first one with just some art. I like the lines, something a little bit more subdued. The preferred treatment to me is just super busy and like a real photo kind of thing. I just prefer some art and maybe the victory for the name, but I definitely don't want to hold this up too much. But yeah, that's where I'm coming from. More art, less photos.
Councillor Brown?
Oh, I wasn't ready. I'm wondering where the victory came from as well. Is that a reference to something?
Yeah, so apparently on the site, the research done into this, there was an old boarding house on the site.
Called the Victory.
Called the Victory, yeah.
Well, thank you for that history lesson. So then, okay, the name's fine. I don't mind. I like the historical aspect of the painting or image. But it is a lot, and I did look at Josh's website for other ideas. Lots of his stuff is really bright, so would also stand out like that, but I'm sure he would, I mean, it's up to the building owner, but yeah, I think we have lots. I mean, I'm not, I don't love any of the suggested images, I guess. So maybe just something more simple. Maybe
Councillor
something
I'm sorry.
that further references the history of the site. I don't know.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to hold up the process, but this is a significant wall, as Councillor Sullivan said. You know, it's going to loom over the entire main street there. So it's pretty important what goes on there. And I agree with them. I'm not super stoked about any of them. I really don't like the image. I think it's like, no offense to the artist, but you know, just something that somebody printed off on their computer and then like chucked up on a wall. It's like, oh, it's not, to me, you know, it doesn't seem very artistic. I think, you know, if these are our only options, I would prefer going with the just the writing, and probably the old style of writing, since it represents a boarding house from the past. Maybe we could actually dig up an image of their sign and actually do a replica sign of what they had on the side of the building instead of making it up. To me, that would be more significant and probably more aesthetically pleasing.
Councillor Sproul, sorry.
Yeah, well, I've really given this a lot of thought. I do not like, I know it was called the Victory, the building that was on that site, but I do not like that the building being named just with these two. It reminds me of downtown Vancouver at the Ritz, at the, you know, somewhere on Robson Street, a building with the title of it along the wall. So no, that is not, that's a city look. I suppose in a way that the graphic does represent the coal railway and running through the forest. And there were a lot of trestles. The big one was when the trestle broke over the Trent River in the 1890s. And I imagine that's maybe where he got this image, because it is a very strong image. It's in the museum, a model of it. But it seems to be a photograph from, you know, that photographic image. I'm wondering if it's Josh who did the mural at Liang's on 5th Street in Courtenay. Because the reason I really like that, the bright colors, it shows a day in the life of people going into Liang's, sitting at the lunch counter. It is kind of photographic painting, but they are not photographs. And I would really see some, because it conjures up an image of a time, maybe in the 60s at Liang's. You can tell what period of time. The people are recognizable. I would think something to do with coal miners. That picture in number 6 mine, with the bent over miner, the mule, the axe. It gives way more of a picture of what Cumberland was like. I think something more of a day in the life of a miner. And I like the black, the monochrome. I just think like an old black and white picture, we could have something as seen in the day of the life. What the people standing in the Victory. We can use that picture of bucket of blood. You know, there are so many images. The museum is full of them. So I really don't like this. It looks like one of those comic magazines, graphic, sorry, they call them graphic novels. And I don't think that fits with Cumberland, not in any way. So here is staff recommendation at bottom of 138. Staff recommends a different rendition with reference to Cumberland history specifically, and rather than a large size photograph, render it as a drawing to make it less overwhelming. I think that's a way forward. Anyway, I don't like any of those things. It needs to be Cumberland history.
I think we can all agree on one thing. I found it too overwhelming and too busy. And there's so many other things that you could do that would be absolutely amazing. I find his colors too glaring. I went on his website and it was really bright. And I don't think that's what we really necessarily want. And I think I like the idea of a miner or the bucket of blood or whatever. But I think depicting people, I think that would be more appropriate. And something that's calming. This is just too overwhelming. So do you have enough information? I know it's what they say, it's in the eye of the beholder.
Like it.
Yes.
It's an important wall, right? It does really,
Yes.
it figures really large on that block, so it's quite tricky. So if it's not convincing for this group, then yeah, I think it's probably not going to work too well. So
This is
yeah, you know, I can pass on the comments. So we can ask for perhaps to make it a little easier, maybe 2 or 3 renditions, so that, you know, he doesn't have to keep coming back. Just for my knowledge, are you when I communicate with him, we talked about the historical elements, perhaps the monochromatic thing. It seemed like some color is actually desired, just not too overpowering. The current design that was on that wall, which is more of a pattern and just white and blue, is that of that kind of style of interest at all?
Where?
Can I just probe?
where's
Yeah,
that?
I really like the mural that's there.
Yeah, so do I.
I like
I think-
Sham's mural quite a
Oh
bit.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
more artistic for me personally. This just looks like a photo of the chosen one. It's just, and like the mayor said, it's quite busy. I mean, this is really going to be quite striking from the street, and it's very important, I think, this decision actually.
Mhm.
So,
And the Shams, I've had so many positive comments about her mural on that, and they were sorry to see that it was going to be covered over.
okay. Because it's meets some of the things that we discussed. You know, it is monochromatic, like it's not overpowering. It's more of a pattern or a design. It's quite lively though at the same time. So
For me
there's no reference to history in that one. So
Yeah.
I'm just testing because it's helpful for the owner if we have a.
It's
Yeah.
almost like the concept of what's on the other side of the Waverly. That mural, I love that. It's been there for years. And it fits in.
Yeah, I think there's a difference though. I love both of those murals too. I think there's a difference though when it's up high.
Yes.
How, like, I don't think either of those murals would look good on a second story building. It's just not the right scale or perspective. But what I do like is that there's not multiple colors. There's 1 or 2 colors, and that seems to help.
It quietens it down.
Yeah. So. Sorry, we're not being very helpful. I don't feel like.
Is he also planning to put a spotlight at the end of the building so it reflects on it at night?
I don't know. Good question.
I mean, the thing is, like pretty much 4 billboard sizes large. I mean, it's got to be the right fit.
Yeah. So maybe he could do some ideas of what we just said. Bring forward. Councillor Spooner.
Yes, and the museum website has all the images, like almost every picture that's ever been taken in Cumberland. And there are very iconic pictures of life underground, true pictures. And in as I say, I mean, I could send at least 2 or 3 in, but he could look through mule pulling a cart but I think people having fun. It was such a bustling, busy place in the 30s. It was way bigger than Courtney Comox, and there was a lot going on. There were cars in the street. There was all sorts, loads of cars. It was, so something from the era of when Cumberland was a happening industrial place with lots of social life, I think would give more of a picture of what you know, if a tourist came and took a picture of that and took it back to their friends back east, they'd sort of wonder what kind of place Cumberland was. I don't think it represents as well.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, at the risk of sounding unpopular, just referring to Sham's mural, rather than some, you know, an old photo or something like that, I'm really more interested maybe in promoting the arts and culture of the community, like Shams is. You know, I'd be more leaning towards something more artistic than historic, per se. That's just my personal opinion.
Could he do one or two of one of the art that Sean's talking about and one of what Councillor Spruill is talking, and then we can see. I think that would be a perfect option.
Mm-hmm.
Then we could see what he is going to present to us.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. It is rather difficult, so having two options might be really helpful.
Or 3.
What he would like to put forward to give us, because you've heard what we would like to see, and maybe he has something else that he would like to also present too. So whatever.
Okay.
But he knows we definitely don't like what he's already presented.
Yeah, I'm a fan of his work, but just not of this treatment.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, he had some beautiful things on his site.
Yeah, he's done a
Art
ton of
pieces.
Courtney. He's great.
Yeah. Okay, so
Do we need a motion?
Motion, yes.
That staff go back to the same artist and ask for a few more choices that reflect the conversation we just had.
Seconder? All in favor? Carried. Next, we have the council receive the volunteer firefighter remuneration policy amendment report.
Never seen.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council.
Hey, Michelle. Sorry.
Yes.
All right, hello.
Okay, so at the 2020 financial plan, the 5-year financial plan, Council approved an increase to the volunteer firefighters compensation for practices and for emergency call out hours. And you approved the rate to go from $15 to $18 an hour. So the policy in front of you amends those amounts as per your financial plan. But then I also just took the opportunity to remove any rate that was within the body of the policy, put it into a schedule, so it'll be easier to update in the future and just more efficient. And then I just made a few changes to the wording so it had some consistencies throughout. And so, yeah, that's about it. You have some financial implications there. The increase was just over $17,000, and the total budget for your callouts and your practices is just over $87,000, and that includes those increases. And so I can answer any questions that you'd like. I've tracked the changes in the policy as well for you.
Councillor Brown?
I did email the fire department, but I'm not sure where that email goes or who has time to answer it given the power outage today. So just wondering where we're at compared to like other communities of similar size and scope.
Yeah, that's a very good question. We were actually talking a little bit about that during our financial planning process this year. And there was a recommendation that perhaps a review goes on for that. So these increases, back in I believe 2018, the rate was at $12 an hour, and so the fire chief was quite clear that other fire departments are paying about $20 an hour or 21 or something. And so at that point, he had asked to increase it from 12 to 21, where, you know, financially that was a bit of a strain in 1 year. So what we had come to an agreement was maybe over the 2019-20 and then the 21 year, we could move it up to that. But yes, we did talk about possibly doing a bit of a review of the whole compensation policy compared to other municipalities. So,
Okay,
but
great.
we don't have that review.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, that was my question too, just to find out sort of where we're at in relation to other fire departments. And just to remember that we're putting $4.2 million into a new fire hall. That's hopefully going to help attract and retain volunteer firefighters as well. We have the new fire engine, again, hopefully going to help attract and retain firefighters. So we're putting a lot of money into our fire department. Yeah, I'm not into being too generous for the paid volunteer position at this point, but I do want to be competitive with other areas. So it'd be nice to have that information come back to us.
Okay.
Understood. Yeah.
Councillor Sproul?
Yeah, I remember a time when I was on council in the early days when we didn't pay any compensation. And yes, I remember at the time not wanting to start since we hadn't, but realizing that's the only way to get people to partake in all the practices. We don't just need people going out to the calls. It's a big job and a huge commitment. And it's getting harder and harder to find people because people are working away. So I have absolutely no problem in giving an increase to the firefighters. They do a really good job and they deserve our support. And this is what happens in the real world too, giving an increase.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of Councillor Sproul and Councillor Kettler. I think these guys are doing a great job and they're a bargain at any price and they put their life on the line for the village all the time and their practices. And I'm proud that we're giving them a new fire hall and a new engine. So I support the raise, but yeah, thanks.
Oh, I'm really pleased that we can do it. It was never in the past times where we couldn't do it. And so this is really nice. We're getting to that point where we can. So thank you very much, Michelle. So someone like to make the motion?
I'd like to make a motion that council approve the amendments to the volunteer firefighter remuneration policy 7.3 to increase compensation for volunteer firefighters for practice and emergency call-outs, including housekeeping amendments.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
The council received the Cumberland Museum and Archives lease.
Move receipt.
Seconder, Councillor Sullivan, all in favor? Carried.
Hello, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this report is to bring Council the draft lease for the occupation of the museum by the Cumberland and District Historical Society. The draft lease is attached to this report. We're not looking for Council's approval of the lease at this point because there is a notice requirement that we'll talk about in a little bit. But we can receive any feedback or questions that Council members have on the draft. And what we're basically looking for from Council at this meeting is to agree in principle to the concept of giving the society exclusive occupation of that building and to discuss the term of the proposed lease. So the museum has occupied the building since its construction in 1981. They're a long-term tenant. And I'll just go through a few items in the report here. So you'll often see that leases and other agreements are based on 5-year terms in local government. And I think this has grown out of a past restriction on liabilities that local governments couldn't take on liabilities for more than 5 years without an elector approval, which comes through referendum or a alternate approval process. So, but this restriction now is just on capital liabilities. So there's no capital liabilities in this lease. There's definitely some operational and maintenance of the building that the village already owns, but there's no new capital liabilities proposed. So that 5-year restriction doesn't apply in this case. So, and over the years, the village has definitely provided some maintenance and repair of the building, and that's reflected in the draft lease as well as current practice. A bit of operational of the grounds and the grass cutting and the gardens the village has taken on. That's set out in one of the schedules to the lease, and we do budget for those amounts in the 5-year plan. As well, the museum is intended to endure sort of any capital projects that the society proposes, and they've been really successful in bringing funds from other sources through grants for those types of renovations and doing those on their own without the village having to incur those. So the intention is not to allow that outside the lease arrangement, like the one that council approved earlier tonight. So the report also reviews some of the in-kind and financial support that the village does provide to the village, including the 5-year operating funding through the service agreement, which currently goes to 2023. And that brings us to the discussion about the basically approval in principle for the lease from council and to give notice. And part of that discussion is the term. And the museum, like we mentioned, has been a tenant for 40 years. So, and I think they intend on continuing that long-term use of the building. The draft lease has a 10-year proposed term in it, but we've been having some discussions with the society in the last few days, and there's definitely an interest on their part for what's been proposed is a 10-year lease with a 5-year renewal option, which is basically a 15-year term. So that's one change to the staff recommendation there. If council is agreeable to that longer term of 15 years, that we look for council to make that change in the resolution. So I don't think staff has any concern. I mean, there is some clauses in there. If the museum discontinued its primary operations to provide a museum, there's tools in the lease where the village could go to the museum and ask to end the lease. So there is some protection there. So we don't have any concern of that continued long-term possession. So we just like to hear back from council.
I do have one question, and that is, if the village decides to move ahead with some other plans of their own and make some facility changes on that, would the lease hold that up with the museum? Could we not work with the museum and agree that maybe there needs to be a change in location or something? Is that possible even with the lease intact?
Yeah, I think if it was mutually agreed upon, absolutely, there's always room for a negotiation. But I think especially with this latest venture and renovation and the financial input from the museum and its sources of funding, that there's a request for a longer term commitment from the village to secure that space with that investment. But you know, if there are any negotiations, it's definitely negotiations are.
Okay. Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they've been a good partner of ours for a really long time. And, you know, having a longer lease gives them some security, and that's probably a positive move. Yeah, I don't really have any problem with giving an extended 10-year lease. So.
Councillor Brown?
I'm just curious, I don't see any, like, is there a requirement for them to be operating a certain amount of time or anything like that in the lease?
Like to be open to the public for certain hours, or not specifically? No. Section, what is it? Section 6, that they do have to, the purpose of the tenancy is to carry on a museum and archives under their objectives of the society.
Right, but it's
So
not defined.
No, it's not defined, but that could be something that we could look at and discuss with the society to have certain opening hours under normal circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they've been great and they've done a lot to help that building as well, and currently are doing a lot to help that building. So, you know, I appreciate what they do in there, and I have no problem extending it for at least 10 years. I just want to make sure we're covered should they decide to do something else.
Councillor Sparrow?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to extend the lease. I have seen no reason to not do that, since they have been managing and improving the building to some extent. And they are like the heart and soul of Cumberland. They're keeping our most precious possessions. And unless they want to go anywhere else, I can't see why we would not renew the lease. I'm totally in favor of doing that. For how many years were we going to do?
The society's asking for 15.
Yeah, that would be fine by me.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I absolutely support that. I'm just curious, the table doesn't include our $41,000 in-kind or grant and aid contribution. I don't know if that's part of the same table, but for some housekeeping for the society, as far as the village providing financial aid and in-kind support. But yeah, of course, I'm into the 15 years even. Why would they go anywhere?
Yes, I agree. They're such a valuable asset to the community, and they're doing some great work and keeping it moving forward. It's been a challenge for them through COVID, as we all recognize that. Hopefully, they said during the COVID that it was going to be major changes to museums, and some of them would not survive through this, but ours seems to be doing just fine. I know sometimes in the past, they have not had the funding and they've had to close down certain hours to make it possible to happen. So hopefully they're through that and that won't happen again. Okay, so can we have a motion?
That council direct that the village give notice of the proposed disposition of 2680 Dunsmuir Avenue by way of a lease with the Cumberland and District Historical Society for a 15-year term.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council received the Child Care BC Spaces Funding Application Submission Report dated October 13th, 2020.
Move receipt.
Second, Councillor Sullivan. All in favor? Carried.
All right, thanks, Mayor and Council. What I am going to do here is just quickly have a quick overview, and then I'll pass it over to our Economic Development Officer. So as Council's aware, we did bring forward a report back on September 28th about various options that are available. And so this report here outlines one of those options that staff have been presented with that we wanted to bring to Council for consideration. And with the deadline for this grant application being, I believe it's November 1st, it was one of the options that we wanted to put before council for consideration, and it's one that seems at this point in time to have the village's ability to move the quickest forward with, so and have the greatest outcome. So maybe I'll pass it over to our economic development officer just to discuss where we're at with that, and then if there's any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Great, thanks, Clayton. Yeah, Council and Mayor, it's a pleasure to be here again. This is a pretty exciting project, and as Clayton mentioned, there's some real opportunity here. When we brought the report back to you 2 weeks ago, we had already had started conversations with the school district, and since then we've had further, which is the impetus for this report. And so what we're asking is your direction on going ahead and applying within the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund. And just to go overview, we can apply for what we're asking to is to apply up to $3 million. Under the funding program, they're trying to seek a maximum value of about $40,000 per space. So under the maximum $3 million, we could be looking at creating up to 75 new childcare spaces in the community. And as proposed, what we're looking at is the establishment and the creation of a childcare space on Cumberland School grounds. Which is quite an exciting thing. I know us in the school district have had conversations about this a couple of times over the past few years. But we're certainly going to acknowledge that we're going to need a bit more further time to hash out what this project a bit looks like. Unfortunately for us, there is some flexibility within the grant program of how we present this project to them that gives us that flexibility that we need. So what do we require with us to partner with the school district around this project? To build the building on the school grounds. A building on school grounds, the agreement would allow it both to have beneficial use as a childcare facility on the campus, as I like to say, but it would also provide some opportunities for our community to have a bit more community space and space that could be used by our community outside of normal operating hours for the childcare. We would also need to identify an operator that would be able a licensed operator to operate this type of facility. At this time, what we are recommending and acknowledging that the work the Boys and Girls Club of Vancouver Island have done, they're known for these types of agreements. I know that they operate both public facilities and private facilities in partnerships with communities. It's familiar to them. So we're recommending that we use them as subject area experts. It's not necessarily the operator, but certainly someone who could provide us the guidance of what the government's looking for from a licensed contractor or a licensed operator at this time. We would also be looking forward to undertaking an expression of interest from our local service providers, both in our community and the greater Comox Valley region, to make sure that we're capitalizing on any opportunities for those opportunities to be realized by local operators as well. So as I mentioned, some of these things, the exact design of the project and both that piece around operating are things that we need to work on, and that's what those recommendations that we've put forward to you are about. And certainly the grant program allows us to work those things out between now and when we submit. And after we submit even, we need to have shovels in the ground by the end of December after decisions made in February. So we have a bit of flexibility even in how we apply. We don't necessarily have to have everything nailed down. So at this time, we're simply seeking your direction for us to apply to the grant funding program for up to $3 million to further work with the school district in exploring that agreement and that relationship. And then to utilize the Boys and Girls Clubs as subject matter expertise on the operating side of what one of these projects looks like.
Okay. Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I'm really happy to see this moving forward and to see us take advantage of this funding opportunity. Looking at the criteria, they do give preference to projects that are on school grounds. So I think that's certainly a benefit. We have a lot better chance, I guess, with this application than we would have if it was on private land like the church grounds, I think. So yeah, just making the most of this grant funding application. And 75 spaces is a lot. So yeah, I'm very happy to see this move forward. Thanks for your work.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add other than let's just build another building in town. we have all sorts of time and money and people. But yeah, it's just super exciting to move forward on this. Obviously, we need all the help we can get with childcare.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I'm happy with all of it, with the distinction of using the Boys and Girls Club, with no offense to the Boys and Girls Club, but we actually have a childcare provider, noted that they are not licensed, on the school grounds that has been in operation for 20 years and has contributed an awful lot to our community. And I find it almost offensive that we have put the Boys and Girls Club in front of them as an expert. And I also fear that putting them in that position as our experts for this project almost makes the assumption that we will then grant them the opportunity to provide that care on the school grounds without having spoken to any of our other childcare operators prior to that. So I know that there is a process in place for a conversation about who's going to operate the center at a later time, but I would certainly hope that at the very least we would talk to CCSS first and not use the Boys and Girls Club as experts, because I don't think we need to, and I think that puts us in a dangerous position moving forward with as an operator, that if we use them as our experts and they design what it might look like and then they bid on the contract, that seems like insider knowledge to me, and an unfair advantage to the rest of the potential operators that have given so much to our community already.
Councillor Sproul. Oh, sorry. Clayton, did you put up your hand? Yes.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So obviously there's very tight timelines on this, and we have spoken to the province on a few occasions now, and they've been very, very clear with us that to do these applications wholly and make sure that they've covered it, it's best to have that information from a group that has currently licensed operations and has relationships with the licensing officers in the sense of understanding what those pieces are. So like has been mentioned with our economic development officer, is that the intent here is to get this application right and do that information properly from the licensed operators. And then absolutely we want to explore any opportunity to utilize any of the existing operators. We need this information very quickly, and that relationship with those licensed the Island Health and the licensing officer is really critical. So I absolutely agree with everything you've mentioned, and that is front of mind, and hopefully that's noted in the report there, that we do want to make sure that everyone who is within the community does get an opportunity, but it is moving very fast here, and we're just trying to make sure we have that information. Similarly, it was mentioned about the facility being on school district property. We're looking at for every advantage to be successful in this, and right now that's really how we're trying to do this. But certainly your feedback and direction on that is we want to make sure this is important for the whole community here, and we want to be clear that this is not absolutely not something that's saying that the Boys and Girls Club will be the operator, just helping us through the application process.
So could we instead say we would engage a licensed operator and then look for a licensed operator to engage with versus naming a specific licensed operator?
If I may,
Caitlin?
if I may, one of the challenges here, again, being a licensed operator, is we may not be aware, we do not have large scale childcare operators in the Valley. We have one that is licensed that is a for-profit, which is not eligible under this funding program. And we have Boys and Girls Club. And I have talked with local childcare providers. We have local childcare providers, largely home-based, that are asking to expand their operations. So the idea as well is to look at this project, and maybe it's not one giant space we create, but it's smaller spaces, so we have room for smaller operators. The goal here, as Clayton mentioned, is to do the application properly. So we make sure that we have the information that licensing officers are looking for, but certainly do an expression of interest in our part to make sure that we realize local opportunities. Absolutely.
Can I follow?
Okay, follow through.
Sorry. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to bring to this conversation is the youth center facility that's currently on the school grounds. And I know I've mentioned this before, that I am hoping to retain that youth center, even though it's operating virtually right now, because it is a very specific, serves a very specific need for vulnerable students, and is currently serving that specific need even through this COVID time. They have a particular student that is there and needs that support. And so if we can in any way combine that, make a youth center space with a childcare space and allow those two operations to be integrated somehow, I think that would go a long way to preserving the youth center space, and also preserving the heritage building that it's housed in, and maybe save us some money on building a new build. I'm not sure about that fiscal decision though. I just think it's really important that the current community partner that is operating on the school ground be consulted throughout this process, and likely should have been consulted already, and that their needs are also taken into account. So thanks.
Councillor Spruer?
Yes, I echo some of Councillor Brown's concerns, because I was concerned with the last meeting on this, when we were talking about helping a particular organization apply for the monies, when I know so many people are working hard to provide childcare, local people. But I was reassured by that paragraph on page 170, just as Kaylin said, that staff will undertake expressions of interest to ensure opportunities for local childcare service. I wasn't aware, though, that I never really thought about the large group that we might have, and whether the capacity is there in local childcare providers. But I'd like to see them consulted for sure. So I think from what Kaylin says, we're going in that direction. And we really have to look local and for the village. And I like the connection with the school. I think that's a really good partnership. Thank you.
I'd just like to add that when we had our meeting with the school district and the ministry, we talked about how important the community school was, the CCSS, and how we all value what it does in our community, and we need to keep that going. So I think that our staff is aware of that. The school board is aware of that, and we don't want to lose anything. We want to build on top of what we already have and make it viable. And I'm sure the community schools will be right up front there in the end, as they always have been. So it's not a concern for me, because I know staff has listened to us at past meetings and will continue to listen to us, and I'm sure we'll hear from them also. So we need a motion to move forward.
I'll move that council direct staff to submit an application to the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund for up to $3 million for the creation of new childcare spaces. Furthermore, that council direct staff to work with School District 71 in exploring the establishment of a partnership agreement for a childcare facility to be added to ST 71 property, and move that staff engage the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Vancouver Island as subject area experts in support of the village's funding application.
Seconded.
All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Brown is opposed?
No, I'm slowly raising my hand. I want the project to move forward. I am disappointed with the Boys and Girls Club inclusion, but I will let it go.
Okay, thank you. Carried. Next, that council received the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program report dated October 13th.
Move receipt.
Seconder, all in favor? Carried.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So I'll do the same here. I'll just quickly present this and then I'll pass this over to our Economic Development Officer to provide some more detail, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. So as council is aware that approximately, I think it was probably about 4 weeks ago, there was an announcement relating to the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program. So that was actually just prior to UBCM there, and prior to the notice that the election was going to be called there. So with about 3 weeks ago, so about a week after that, the municipality, the village here, received the grant program guide. And as you're aware through the report here, the timeline is extremely tight. That, we received that a few weeks back, not even a few weeks, I think it was about 2.5 weeks ago, and that we have to have an application submitted by the end of October. So staff reviewed the application and what criteria and in relation to what strategic priorities we had, as well as the council had, as well as any capital projects, and also ones that we were ready to basically have projects that were shovel ready. And so what you have before you are the projects that at this point in time we are able to provide information and project background that would allow us to complete the application. And so these are for your consideration, and I'll pass over to the Economic Development Officer here just to answer any questions or fill in the blanks relating to these projects here. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Clayton. Council, maybe what I think the most important thing to do is just acknowledge that there's 4 different funding streams within this program, and that as a community, we're allowed to apply for 2 of them. So it's either 2 under the same stream or 1 from different each streams. And so what Clayton acknowledged we've done is we've put forward 3 projects, 2 sort of preferred and 1 optional. Should we find that either of the 2 not be able to meet the criteria. But to this point, we haven't had any sort of signs that wouldn't be the case. And so the first project that we've proposed is to apply with under the RER, or the Rural Economic Fund, for the servicing that's going to be done out at the Bevan lands. And as you may know, right now we have a subdivision application in front of us that includes servicing, providing and constructing water servicing out to the industrial lands. The concept behind this project for us is for us to apply for funding of up to $500,000 that we could then contribute as a member of this project in building out this infrastructure to the Bevan lands. What this does is, under our current plans, the developer would be establishing this water line, and then through agreement, be a latecomer or development cost charge type project, we would be giving them back credits or funding as people came onto that line. By allowing ourselves to apply for this funding and contributing it to the project, what it allows to do is 1, open up more cash flow for that developer so that he can invest in other ways in the development, but allows us to have a bit more of an economic understanding from these projects right away, because we don't need to pay back the full cost of that water line because we're part owners in it. And so it allows us to get some economic benefits a little bit quicker. And that is the goal behind this project. And so this would require us applying for the grant, but also to come to an understanding and agreement with the developer on exactly how that project's going to be completed. The second one that we've put forward is related to Cumberland Lake Park, which is great to see. It continues to be a success for us out there. This is certainly related to some much needed infrastructure improvements out there, both the boat launch and around the waterfront, and the retaining walls that need to be repaired. And of course, those planned works for the swimming area, and improving some signage and other sorts of enhancements around the park itself. These are projects, different than the Bevan lands. We're not building new infrastructure here. I think this is a good opportunity through these grant programs, both this one and the optional project of identifying existing assets and investing in them and bringing them up to a level with which we are no longer sort of chasing our tail. So outside of the Cumberland Lake Park, the optional project is to invest some grant funding into improvements down at Village Park around the washrooms and field house type area. Again, these are projects that we have some existing background on with the Bevan water line. We have the full project that's put forward to us as part of that subdivision package. So using those plans and those designs and that costing, we have all the information that's required in the grant program. I know Kevin and other staff have been working hard on concepts and improvements for the Cumberland Lake Park. So of course, that's also information we already have in hand. And then likewise for Village Park, these are projects that we could easily get off the ground. The funding, the application deadline again is at the end of this month. So things are quite urgent at this time. But I will answer your questions if you have any.
Okay, this time we'll start with Councillor Sproul.
Well, free money, what can I say? And having decisions, making decisions about what to do with it. I read the whole, really, the criteria for getting money, and we would fit into so many categories. You see all the historic stuff, the tourism, but I know we are looking at items that are within our priorities. And I definitely am excited at the idea of getting a water service out to Bevan and being able to develop that area. Are we to decide which of those three that we're to choose?
No, they're asking us to. The first two are what we want, but the third is in case the first one
get the others.
through.
Well, I'm quite happy with what is presented here. It's great. I hope we are successful.
Councillor Kettler.
Thanks. Yeah. So going back to the Bevan Lands project, so it's 2 kilometers of water service line. Is that what we're paying for with that $500,000?
Well, we have $500,000. We'd be probably, sorry, through the chair, looking at about, it's an overall cost of 1.3, I believe. So we'd be contributing, just over 40% or 40%. Yeah.
So, and it's along Bevan Road. So the proposal is that it would hook up to the well service that he's currently putting on site.
He is not, sorry, through the chair, he is not, no longer will there be well service out there related to this development.
Right.
This water line is to service all the lots.
Okay.
And future lots. Yeah.
Okay, because that wasn't quite clear, but I'm happy that.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, and that's probably something that's come about with the subdivision application, is that he's realized the economical feasibility of wells as opposed to the water line, and the water line is the preferred means of meeting his needs.
Mm-hmm. Good.
So then my other question is, what about septic then? If we have village water flowing out there, the next thing would be sewer line. So
yes, and through the chair, I know in speaking with Rob, liquid waste or solid, is a bit different. Simply because it's going to need things like pump stations. The grade is not quite the same. So it will be a bit more significant project. It's also something that I would recommend we don't, we will want to see some demand growth out in those lands before we, because it's going to be a significant $10, $15 million type project. And so we want to make sure that we're timing it right and understanding what's happening out there and the types of businesses that we'll be getting. I know the developer as well is very interested in solving many of his own things. So he's talking about energy solutions and other types of waste, circular economy type solutions. So I'll be interested to see what he brings to the table as well.
That's great. And I also really like the improvements to Lake Park. We were talking about this at the CVRD today, that you know, it's really the only public access on the lake, and it's getting so much use that it really does require these upgrades. So I definitely think that's top of the list as well. So thank you.
Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, this is exciting. As Councillor Spruill said, free money. Everybody likes that. Yeah, I absolutely support the priorities in these choices here. And I would assume that for the lake part, we'd just be, other than the dock and the ramp, we'd be knocking off some of the master plan needs and such with that.
Yeah, particularly through the chair, sorry, Councillor Sullivan, particularly around the retaining walls and around the waterfront. And then security upgrades to the swimming areas and stuff are all part of the master plan, I believe.
Right on. And I'd love to see, yeah, if it doesn't work out and we get some village park improvements, that would be great. And even though it's not yet on our priorities, the destination development would seem like a perfect opportunity for an outdoor skating rink in Village Park.
Yeah.
There it is.
That will bring lots of people in from the valley and all over the place to skate outside in all winter long. Anyway, sorry about that. Not sorry.
Councillor Brown?
Skating rink and parking, associated parking for said skating rink. Yeah, I'm excited about all three of these options. I love the idea of taking water out to Bevan. I think it'll really help that development move along a little faster and more efficiently and with less concern from our conservationists. And obviously the lake park is in much need of both the boat launch repair and the retaining. I happen to camp where that retaining wall is failing this summer. So love to see that repaired. And also the buoys, I think would be a great addition. I know they're also failing. And I know you have all considered this already, but just to reiterate the need for parking, like some kind of magic parking tool system, I don't know, out there. So hopefully somebody can come up with some super innovative way to solve some of that issue while we do the other things, rebuild the boat launches. I did consider whether or not the way we build the boat launch could perhaps limit the size of vessel that is going out there. I think the intent was always for little fishing skiffs and transportation up to cabins and that sort of thing, not necessarily monster-sized boats with the associated noise and stuff that goes along with that. So I'm not sure if that's possible in the design of a boat launch ramp dock system, but I'll leave that with you guys and the operators out there. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. I agree with all three options. One of the things that came up at the task force meeting was that would it be beneficial to have support from the other communities on our proposals?
Yes, Your Worship. I think that particularly on the Bevan lands, knowing that they are support for development up there, I would definitely seek, their support. And I think the same thing for Lake Park. Again, this is the only public access on the lake, and our whole region depends on our community to keep that in good shape. So I would, yeah.
Because they all said they would do that, give us support, but they would expect us to give them support. And unfortunately, with the time frame, we're not going to have another council meeting to address this. So if nobody has any objections, then we will support what they put forward and they can support what we put forward. Yes, Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, and maybe just so far what we have for Comox is an enhancement of their marina, and they're also putting forward expansion of the airport area.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that Courtney was putting forward the upgrades to the Fifth Street Bridge. So that's, I think there may be some more things coming, but that's what was on the table so far that they were seeking regional support for.
And do you remember what they were going, the area B, C was going, no?
Oh, sorry. Yes, the areas, they're applying for food hub funding. Yes.
Okay. Clayton?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that just to note on this, I mean, the funding program does say up to $1 million, but if you actually look at the overall size of the actual grant, it's not that extensive. Each of these programs is only around 20 million, and I think one of them is 30 million. So when you look across the province, it's not a big amount of money. And so we also, when we looked at this, we were looking at projects that were reasonable in funding amounts that would be able to be successful. I know other groups that are looking for the full 1 million, but from our conversation with the funding, they're saying, just be aware that the intent probably is to get the funding out to as many projects as possible. So, but we will have a conversation with the other groups about support. And the one last thing I'd say to that is the actual application for this one is a very streamlined application. As you can see, we're not even asking for a council resolution because they're asking for it this way, but they're actually not seeking a specific council resolution from us. It's they just want to know that there's support for the actual application. So it's a very streamlined process that they're, because of the tight timelines on this. So letters of support are in some ways they're looking for just acknowledgement that there's groups that have been spoken to, so not specifically large numbers of letters there. So just for information.
Okay, so there is a motion there.
The council directs staff to submit an application to the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program under Rural Economic Recovery Stream for funding in support of infrastructure development for the Bevan Lands Water Service with a maximum project value of $500,000. That council directs staff to submit an application to Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program under Community Economic Resilience Stream for funding in support of infrastructure upgrades and or improvements to Cumberland Lake Park with a maximum project value of $200,000. And that council directs staff to submit an application to the Community Economic Recovery Infrastructure Program under Community Economic Resilience Stream for funding in support of upgrades and improvements of the field house and washroom facilities at Lake Park, and that this application only be submitted should the Bevan Lands project be deemed ineligible under the funding program.
And that should have been Village Park.
Village Park.
Yes. Okay. You said Lake Park.
Oh, did I?
Yes. First and second there. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. We're on the countdown. Bylaws. What is your pleasure?
Oh, where are we?
I'll move that council adopt permissive tax exemption 2021 bylaw 1135/2020.
Seconded.
All in favor? Carried. Next.
Recommend that council adopt the animal control amendment bylaw number 1134/2020.
Seconder. All in favor? Carried. Next, that council received the report application for an OCP amendment and rezoning of 3339, 3341, 3345 2nd Street, dated October 2nd, 2020.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Yeah, I'll just provide a brief summary of the report and the application for rezoning and OCP amendment for this project. So this came forward to you in August and was referred to the Homelessness Affordable Housing Committee, the Advisory Plan Commission, and the Accessibility Committee for recommendations. The application is to rezone 3 adjacent properties, which will be consolidated, into a single lot to allow for the construction of a 22-unit multi-family apartment complex. So as you might recall, the initial application was for 23 units. The applicant has reduced that to 22 to provide a space that was initially dedicated for 1-bedroom as a multi-purpose room for the residents. It also fits better with the BC Housing funding package request for proposals that this applicant is hoping to access as part of this project for project funding. The project is for affordable housing and would be following the BC Housing guidelines under the Community Housing Fund, which is the funding they're seeking for decomposition of the units, which would be 30% for affordable housing, moderate income, which is just somewhat less than market rental rates, and then 50% rent geared to income, which would not exceed the 30%. So, which means rent would not exceed 30% of rent and utilities of the household income, and 20% a deep subsidy. So there's a mix of families and income levels that would be accessing this housing in on this property. Staff reviewed the zoning. Our zoning bylaw currently does not have a multifamily zone that would fit this development. So as a part of this making this application work, there's a requirement to add a new zone to the zoning bylaw, which we would call the RM4 residential multifamily 4 zone. And it would it's written so that it would allow for 85 units per hectare, which would actually allow only to 17 units if it was market rental. But since the affordable housing unit, there's also bonus built into the zone, which then would permit for the 22 units exactly that the applicant is proposing in this case. The question has come up of how this compares to other sites or in Cumberland in terms of density, and whether we have that kind of density elsewhere in the village. So we do downtown on Dunsmuir Avenue, which has 0 setbacks, of course, because it is right downtown core, and allows up to 4, actually depending, even 5 stories potentially. So the density is quite a bit higher, but it's in a mixed use commercial residential zone. So which is a little bit different. So this proposal did go to the committees, and the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee did review the comments that were brought forward by the public, and which are also part of this report. They appended as one of the attachments to the report. And yeah, the density was a concern to people, the traffic that this might generate, just the amount of people in a neighborhood that doesn't have this kind of density currently. Parking was an issue that was raised. So as one of the ways to accommodate at least one of the concerns, the committee suggested that the zone not permit more than the height of the building that is proposed, which is 3 stories, which with a pitched roof. So we initially had shown in the zone that was presented earlier to you up to 15 meters, which is what it's permitted on Dunsmuir Avenue. So the revised zone reduces that to 12 meters, which would permit the 3 stories and a pitched roof. The height of the current building would be 11.34 meters. I think I remember that correctly. So the application also went to the Advisory Planning Commission, which is recommending to have the bylaws go forward for first and second reading and a public hearing. Because the applicant is required to construct the parking, on-street parking along 2nd Street, the advisory planning recommended waiving the parking cash in lieu, and that would be then part of a separate application by the applicant as part of their variance for the rear setback. They can request that. So it's not a recommendation that was included as part of this report. The accessibility committee suggested a number of accessibility for the applicant to explore a number of accessibility improvements. Generally, they were very happy with the design, which partly due to meeting BC Housing Design Guidelines, meets a lot of accessibility requirements. It has an elevator. It has 20% of the units are accessible. It has accessible parking stalls at the entrance. And there's going to be letdowns at the sidewalk that the applicant is required to put in. So they were very happy with that. So really the additional comments that were made are summarized in this report, which is just a push button at the entrance, considering an accessible feature on the playground that would be required as part of the multifamily development permit for the site that the applicant that will come forward to you next. And ideas for where the accessible parking spaces could go, and potentially allowing some adaptable use of the units and joists for lifting. So yeah, this is not part of the rezoning or the OCP amendment so much. So this would be coming, these kind of recommendations or suggestions by accessibility committee would be considered in the more detailed designs. At this point, I just want to draw, there was a site meeting held by the applicant on site in August, which allowed for social distancing outside. It was about 35 to maximum 40 participants who came to the meeting. Quite a number of them supportive, quite a number of them also raising concerns, and we did receive quite a few submissions, and you will see them appended. So the size of the building was an issue, as I mentioned already. The not just the number of stories, but also just the density, the number of units, what that would mean for the neighborhood. Potentially a number of dogs that people might have in that building. The lack perhaps of open space for children, and also a concern was raised, the additional traffic on the street, Alveston going up to 2nd Street, where a lot of kids are walking to get to school. So these were some of the concerns that were raised by members of the public. Storm and sewer piping concerns was another one, and these would be addressed through are being addressed through the development permit process. So the applicant is required to service the building as part of the development permit, whatever is required to adequately serve the building through the sewer, storm, and water pipes. So they may have to be doing some upgrades. So I think that summarizes where we're at. So staff recommendation is to bring the OCP amendment and zoning bylaw at this point forward to public hearing to receive more additional input from the public. The OCP amendment would also include an amendment to make this a development permit area, and the applicant has already submitted their application under that permit, which will then get into more details, design, landscaping, hardscaping, the play space, the parking, and that kind of thing. So yeah, at this point, if you do have questions. Yep.
Okay, Councillors Kettler.
I don't really have questions. We've seen the application before, and I think, as you said, that the new suggestions around accessibility are going to come back to us at a later point, and so I'm happy to just pass what's before us today and bring it to public hearing.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, my only concern is I know the single, it was a studio or a 1-bedroom that was for the caretaker has been removed, and so no caretaker on site. So that would be who then is managing the building? Is that Dawn to Dawn doing site maintenance and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the operating societies would be the Comox Valley Transition Society and Dawn to Dawn. Largely Dawn to Dawn would have the presence on site. So the building does include an office, a space for Dawn to Dawn right close to the entrance. There's a little office space. There's a little reception area. So the discussion about the 1-bedroom unit, you're right, was to be the caretaker unit. this was discussed with BC Housing. So one is that the tenants that are going to be in this building, it was believed, do not require a caretaker. They're independent. They're not the hard to house. So the decision was made as a result of that would be more useful, and in consultation with BC Housing, to have a multi-purpose room for the tenants. So the operator would be on site during the day, but it wouldn't be around the clock.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't concerned about so much about, I mean, I'm concerned about the people as well, but I wasn't concerned about them needing support. I was concerned about the building needing support, but I won't need it for a while. So I think that's and they've got a space to work out of.
Yes, and part of their application to BC Housing, they have to submit their tenant policies. So the operator will have policies of how to, that tenants have to abide by. So there's an operating policy that is included as part of the application. So that will then be in effect.
Okay, so then my other question is on the new zone, the RM4. I don't see that it says that it's rental, and so wouldn't we want that included in the zone? So that should we have another applicant? We know this one will be rental, but now we've created a zone where you can have 17 dwellings, and we haven't specified that we want them to be rentals.
Mm-hmm. I mean, every application has to go through the same process of a OCP amendment and rezoning at a public hearing. So even though the zone is in your zoning bylaw, doesn't mean someone else can have it, so to speak. So it is up to you. So for this particular use, because there'll be a housing agreement on title, that's part of it. That'll be one of the conditions of rezoning, that they register the housing agreement on title. So it is for affordable housing. That's the idea. As part of this rezoning, it's not per se required that there be a rental only zone. The housing agreement is actually stronger, right? Because it's on title of the property, whereas the rental only zone, you can apply to rezone. So for this particular development, we did not include it as a rental only zone because of there'd be a housing agreement.
Yeah, and so if someone else wanted to rezone their property into this zone, there would be an opportunity for us to amend that at that time to require that be rentals.
So yeah, I suppose you can. I mean, then we possibly create a new zone, right? It's entirely up to you. Like I said, anyone who applies, if there's no zone that fits them, we would have to create a new zone. So if you wanted this as a rental only zone, it would mean that someone else applies who want condominiums, strata, building strata. They would just apply for a different zone.
Yeah.
Because they wouldn't want a rental only zone. So yeah. If you want to send a signal that the village wants rental only, it would.
I'm thinking about the future. So not in relation to this development. I know this one's safe, but say another piece of property is purchased that is the size and scale to do something like this, and we have this zone in place, so they apply to rezone their property to this, and then they turn it into condos and not rentals. So
yeah, so
that's
anyone who applies can, they have a choice. They can apply. We don't we can't restrict people what people want to apply for. They have a right to apply for what they would like to see. So if someone comes forward with a vision where they want condos and say this is a rental only zone, they would just apply for a different zone, and we would, as part of the application process, say this is the kind of zone that would fit that use. Council can turn that down and say we're denying the rezoning. But each application kind of comes forward, and then you have to see, do you have a zone that fits or you don't? but also they're free to apply what they would like to see on their property happen, and we would bring the application forward for discussion.
Right.
Okay.
Did I answer your question or not really?
Well, I'm trying to think about the future. And now that we've created this new zone with a density that we don't have elsewhere outside of Dunsmuir. So there's nothing preventing anyone from applying to rezone their property to this and creating condos out of it. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's what we want. But I think we'd prefer rentals.
Yeah, so you could suggest, it would not affect this proposal because it is going to be rental. So you could suggest as a principal use that.
Can I have a point of order here? Can we just stick to this one? I really appreciate what Councillor Brown's talking about, but this isn't anything to do with this specific report.
It has to do with the zoning that's being.
No, I understand. I do understand. But you're talking about future zoning that isn't happening, that isn't part of this report we're talking about. And I'm with you and I support you, but we can talk about that when that comes up.
Okay. Councillor Sullivan, you're.
Well, yeah, it just, it's unfortunate to read the surrounding residents who aren't really supportive of this. And a lot of them mention that there's no 3-story buildings in town and that's what they're hanging their hats on. And unfortunately for our residents, they're really gonna have to put their seatbelts on because within the next year, there's gonna be 3 or 4-story buildings. So this is unfortunately the time in Cumberland's history where we're starting to change significantly. And unfortunately, we're gonna have to squeeze in some stuff like this. I mean, it's unfortunate that things are gonna change so much, but I mean, we need this housing for these people and for the lower income housing. I mean, the Valley needs this more than anything. So I'm really hoping that people can really get used to this and accept this and support this. But yeah, I'm supporting all the recommendations.
Councillor Spruill. Your mic's on.
Yes, I got it. Yeah, I echo all the sentiments of Councillor Sullivan. It isn't, I know a lot of people in that area and they're very concerned because it's a very quiet, it's one of the quieter corners of Cumberland. It's a dead-end street, I think, second there, and there's Ambleside. So that's, you know, those are the people that will be most affected. And I know they're very concerned about the height of the project. But the fact is there are equally other people, friends contacting, saying, please go ahead on it. They know how valuable this kind of project is because we have nowhere for low-income people, and it's a great idea. It would be a great project. I think only the public hearing will really tell us what the majority of people want. Now, it would be great if it could be just Cumberland only people. I mean, if I don't know how to put this, but it does soften the blow when people see it as being an advantage to them in Cumberland. And there's a lot of feeling that outsiders are coming. I mean, it's a Cumberland thing. But the fact is we won't be able to say, or not the providers, the builders, the managers of this project, they won't be able to say this is just for Cumberland people. It will be first come, first served. The thing that interests me most is that I can see having one bedroom unit and 4 2-bedroom units, 15 3-bedroom, because it's apparently hard to find 3-bedroom rental accommodation. But 4-bedroom units seems like a mansion. I grew up in a 2-bedroomed house, and many of the people I knew did. It's just that I can't imagine why. I prefer it. I guess this is not up to us, but to have more 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. I would, and less 4-bedroom. I don't know, that's a bit excessive. So I don't know who would deal with that. But anyway, I look forward to seeing what the public have to say. I know it's not popular, as Councillor Sullivan says, things are changing here. And I think we're doing the right thing, trying to get some affordable housing in. And there aren't any other places that we have any kind of control or say on. This is our chance to follow through with our priorities.
I'd just like to add the comment that to me, the requirement for a 4-bedroom is there must be a need for it or they wouldn't put it in there. And so this is a perfect opportunity to try that and see. And I fully support it moving ahead to public hearing. Councillor Kettler, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just that they did do needs assessment and they do have the lists of people waiting for these units and to fill those specific units. And a lot of them are Cumberland residents. So, right. Yeah.
Or
People
former, or former residents that
Yeah.
had to move out because they couldn't afford to live here anymore. So yes. So someone like to make the motion?
Sure. I'll move that council give first and second reading to official community plan amendment bylaw number 1136/2020. The council give first and second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 1137/2020. And the council schedule a public hearing for official community plan amendment bylaw number 1136/2020 and zoning amendment bylaw number 1137/2020 on Wednesday, November 18th at 7 p.m. at the Recreation Center gym.
Second. Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. No new business, notice motions and announcements, public hearing for the new fire hall property, October 19th, 2020 at 7 p.m. at Cumberland Recreation Center. Committee of the Whole, October 26, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. by registration to info@cumberland.ca. Committee of the Whole Budget, October 27th, 2020 at 9 a.m. by registration to info@cumberland.ca. Now we're moving into question period, and please send your questions to info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period. Note, please limit to questions only. Comments will not be read out. So we'll give you some time to send some emails if that's what you would like to do. Just a reminder that council members are available at any time if you want to contact them with a concern or an issue. And we'll just wait for Rachel to see if we have anybody. It is getting a little late. It's been a long meeting.
Hi there. I don't have any questions yet. Wait a few more moments. I don't think there's a lot of viewers left. I think there's
I'm
4.
surprised Councillor Kettler's
Yeah.
still with us.
No fortitude, these people, no fortitude.
Determination.
I figured it would be a 13-hour day today, so
Yeah.
pretty close.
I think you're good. There's no questions coming.
Okay. So close and adjourn open meeting.
I'll move that recommend the council close and adjourn the meeting to the public pursuant to section 90 of the community charter to consider personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or has been being considered for position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. Law enforcement, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment.
Second, Councillor Brown, all in favor? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.